Well, hello again. Welcome back. Oh, I turned that too far down. Now, today, I'd like to talk briefly about another book that I've read and that I'm rereading because it is that good. The mark of a good book is how it bears rereading. And that book is Caesars of the Wilderness by that guy, Peter C. Newman. And this is the middle book in a trilogy, and I don't have the first and the third book, I just have the second book. This is an account of the merger of the Nor'westers and the Hudson Bay Trading Company in Canada. So this is the 1820s through the 1840s, that kind of time period. Canadian history is not well understood in Canada at all. In modern public education in Canada, in particular, we have these native studies classes and courses of learning where zero primary sources are referred to. Zero. And as a result, children who think they have been educated have learned nothing. And their instructors, no less. This book can form a part of the antidote to that intellectual miasma. Now, uh, there's some fantastically interesting things about this. First off, the book is very well written. It's an arresting story to begin with. It's very dramatic, very well researched. And this is my kind of book. Oh, but the author Newman went and scoured the Hudson Bay Trading Company archives in order to in order to write this. So he offers an awful lot of primary source material. There's maps, there's woodcuts and paintings. This is a good one. This I don't know if you can see that very well, but it's a print showing the effects of liquor on the natives in the fur trade. This is something that has long been a controversial issue in both the Canadian and the American fur trades. One of the things that Newman makes clear from the Hudson Bay archives is that the men who wanted to stop selling liquor to the natives in exchange for furs were the traders themselves. The local agents in Western Canada, what is now Western Canada, what was then the Northwest Territories, repeatedly begged London to stop selling rum and whiskey to the natives. Stop sending us this stuff. Uh, this is bad for the natives. So the abolitionist streak in Western Canada really started with Hudson Bay traders. This is not a thing that I knew prior to reading this book. The and he recounts anecdotes, well attested and recorded anecdotes of events that happened that led to this. So just the horrible devastation of the native morals that this cheap access to lots of alcohol was. They and this book also puts to firm rest the myth of the noble savage. Rousseau didn't know what he was talking about. The native culture in Canada was one of theft, rapine, warfare, plunder. It was not good. we stopped the slave trade in North America by coming here. I'd just like to put that out there. The Americans often get a lot of flack for the black slave trade, the transatlantic trade, which they kind of earned that, you know. But in the West, we put an end to the native slave trade, which was running. The slave trade network was basically running from, you know, northern Alberta all the way down into southern Mexico and beyond. I actually know a guy who told me a story one time about a friend of his whose grandmother in the 1920s, living up in the Yukon Territory, on one native village and one reserve, on one side of the mountain chain, was kidnapped by her husband and drugged back to his community on the other side of the mountains. Apparently, there was a 7 day long horse chase. Her brothers and cousins tried to get her back. There were some gunfights. Anyway, she was never recovered by her family and wound up having 11 kids with this guy. That was in the 20s. Okay. She lived into the 60s, I think. That history is not that far back. No, that is an anecdote told around a campfire. But these kind of stories are common. Um, so he puts to death the myth of the noble savage, which is a marvelous thing to do. You know, we should never lie to ourselves about our past. It does us no good. It does not honor our ancestors, and it does not set us up for future success. Tell the truth. Always tell the truth. Something else he does is he really highlights some very flamboyant characters. So, in the chapter that he entitles The Birch Bark Napoleon, he introduces a fellow named George Simpson, who for 40 years uh, dominated the Hudson Bay Trading Company. He was the director of the company for a very long time. He was a most interesting character. This man needs a movie. Okay, he he very literally was a dominant man in the continent. He was sort of like a Cecil Rhodes, except in North America. Um, and he predated Cecil Rhodes by a few decades. Though there would have been some overlap there. Anyway, for those of you who don't know, Cecil Rhodes was involved in Africa in the British Imperial Project. There, Simpson was the Canadian version. He was born in Scotland, spent most of his life in Canada. But at one point, he decides he's going to circumnavigate the globe with his sons. With two of his sons. He had many sons from several women. So he's not a paragon of moral virtue necessarily. But he's a very compelling story. And so he decides in this circumnavigation, he's going to attend the Hudson Bay Trading Company board meeting in London, and then immediately depart and visit as many Hudson Bay Trading Company outposts as he can. So he crosses the Atlantic by ship. He crosses Canada by canoe and horse, mostly by canoe, stopping off visiting agents and a variety of um, places along the way. Now he's in his 50s at this point. He's a good 10 years older than me. He was notorious for his physical stamina and strength. In a previous age, he would have been a conqueror, a war captain, an Alexander the Great kind of a guy. He goes to Astoria in what's now Oregon, takes a ship over to the Hudson Bay Trading Company outpost in Hawaii, visits there, sails for Asia. When he makes landfall in the Russian Empire, buys horses, and with his boys and their retinue, they ride across the Russian Empire. Now you have to remember, this is like the 1840s, 1850s. Russia had not fully conquered some of that territory until decades after he rode through. So he is riding through maybe not an active combat zone, but it's not a safe place. And he doesn't care. He's gotten in gunfights before. This is nothing. Rides across the Russian Empire, across the Eurasian steppe. He at one point he takes a detour down into the Ottoman Empire. Apparently challenges the Constantinople swim champion to a swim across the Golden Horn, and thrashes this kid, this 19-year-old athlete. Hops back on his horse, goes back to the Russian Empire, goes to St. Petersburg, negotiates some sort of trade concession between the Hudson Bay Trading Company and the Russian Empire, sails down the Baltic back to London, and makes it back there in time for the next AGM. Like, that's wild. This is a fellow. They should make a movie about this guy. Like, why are we? Why is Hollywood even bothering with lesser stories? Like, this man, he was a dude. He was the birch bark Napoleon. But yeah, he was notorious for cost cutting, for pinching his pennies, for being a sharp trader. He ruled the Northwest with an iron rod. That's what it said of him. So, yeah, an interesting cat. I recommend this book. I heartily recommend this book. It is good. The the subject of Canadian history is not well understood at all. And it is important in a Canadian context that we understand our history, because there are bad actors in our world making illegitimate use of Canadian history to push radical social agendas on us. We are being lied to by the left. And so if we would defend ourselves in this civilizational struggle, we should probably know what we're talking about. I mean, if you remember a few years back, Justin Trudeau prostrated himself upon a mass grave in Kamloops, weeping and begging whoever for forgiveness for residential school slaughter. To this day, not one grave has been exhumed from any mass grave of natives from residential schools anywhere. We were lied to. We were told that we were genocidal and that our ancestors were genocidal, homicidal maniacs. The church was blamed for it because certain segments of the church participated in the residential school system, which, again, I have no compunction about vehemently opposing the kidnapping of children to send them to school. I am for education. I am against kidnapping. That's an easy one. And you should be for education and against kidnapping as well. But we were lied to about that thing so that the left could legitimize the persecution of the church in Canada. So, if they lie about that, what else are they lying about? That's a fair question. Primary sources and a return to them are going to be where your answers are at. Always go back to the sources. Ad fontes, to the sources. Then Newman is a fellow who went back to the sources and then provides receipts. It's also just a ripping good yarn. History is way more interesting than the Marxists make it out to be. Anyway, that's my book recommendation for the day. And thank you very much for listening. Lord bless.